Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech and EdTech, the show where we explore how technology can power teaching and learning at scale. I'm Zahra, and if you work in K 12, support multilingual or multicultural learners, today's episode is for you. We're digging into how parents can better understand and support student learning and what EdTech teams need to change to make that possible. Joining me is Stephanie Parra, CEO of All in Education, an organization leading parent engagement, leadership development, and advocacy across diverse communities. We'll talk about what proficiency should look like for families, how AI can support rather than exclude multilingual or low connectivity households, and what real two-way communication and parent agency should be in 2026. Stephanie, welcome to Tech in EdTech.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. We're very happy to have you here as well. To start, I'd love to hear about your journey in education and what prompted your work at All in Education.
Yeah, so I started All in Education as the founding executive director, now CEO, back in April of 2020, which was a crazy time to start a new organization. But
Mhm.
I came to the work as a former school board member, so I served in a local high school district here in Phoenix, Arizona. On the school board for 10 years. I also was working in education policy at the time, doing advocacy work at our state legislature. And so for me, the context that I kind of bring and brought to All in Education was really rooted in the importance of community being involved in decision making, and the importance of parents and caregivers really having access to the knowledge, skills, and the support systems to really advocate for their children. And so when we started All in Education, if you remember what April of 2020 looked like, that was at the height of COVID and the height of the pandemic. And so that context and that environment is where we started our work. And quite honestly, I think the pandemic taught me a lot, when we were navigating distance learning. I was getting questions. I was the school board president at the time, drew that short straw, and so in navigating that, in that leadership capacity, I had a lot of questions around what the Latino community needed at the time, coming from different communities, different leaders, here locally. And so rather than making assumptions about our community, I really wanted to take the time to listen, to parents and caregivers and educators to really understand what they were going through as we were navigating, that the COVID pandemic. And so that is what jump started the work of All in Education. We kind of had to scrap any initial thoughts and plans that we had to adapt to the environment that we were living in real time. And so that became core to our work with families and our work with parents and caregivers, because what we realized, was that there was a lot of talk about the digital divide,
Mhm.
but we really were focused on the communication divide that we uncovered, at the time, and the divide between schools and families not kind of meeting each other, missing each other, and needing to really strengthen that relationship and strengthen the bridge, between schools and families. And so our work now at All in Education centers around families. It centers on the importance of parents and caregivers having access to knowledge, skills, confidence, and agency to navigate a complex system in order to effectively advocate for their children and support their students' learning journeys. And so that's really what our work is driving towards now. And after 5.5 years, I'm very proud, to share that we have supported over 800 parents and caregivers in that time. Our alumni network is now over 900 leaders, and so we're reaching families at scale and want to continue to do that work.
Really amazing. Appreciate all of those details on your journey, and congrats on all the work that you are doing and the positive impact that you're having on the community. And I like a lot of things that you said there in terms of how you framed it and just making it a time for and having to shift, of course, quickly as we all did during COVID, but taking that time to listen and learn and not making assumptions about what the community needed. And calling it the communication divide, because I think that's so huge and probably was so critical to your success and how you got going. So thank you. Thank you for all of that. I'd like to dive in a little bit about to talk about proficiency and connecting learning at home. So families tend to act on what they understand, and proficiency can feel a bit like education jargon. How should schools talk about and define proficiency so parents and caregivers know what to do tonight and they're not just trying to interpret a test score that their child got last week, and where they can really start to dig in and define some of those things?
Yeah, I think, as educators, we love our alphabet soup. We love our acronyms and our language. I think it is part of our culture as a system, as a sector. And parents really need plain language explanations. Your child is here at X, and we need to get them to Y, and this is what you can do to support that journey. And so, getting very clear about um, the what we're trying to say rather than getting stuck in the jargon, I think is critical. And we also have to, make the proficiency data actionable for families, not have it live in the abstract, but really make it feel like it is something that they can work towards. That's what we've been seeing in our work with families. The more that we can, bring it, remove the jargon, be very clear about what this means. If your child, I think, for example, if we were to share with a parent where their child is reading, I think the most resonant point that families experience in our Parent Educator Academy is when we talk to them about proficiency and what that means, and then we explain it as a way of, this means that your child is currently sitting in a fifth grade classroom reading at a third grade level. The reaction that you get from families is like, oh my goodness, how did this happen, and what can I do? What do I need to do at home in order to support my students' growth? And so again, it's getting out of the alphabet soup and the jargon that we love to live in as educators, and really making it using plain language to explain and make it easy for parents to understand. Because once they realize that their children or their child is sitting in a fifth grade classroom reading at a third grade level, they feel the sense of urgency
Yeah.
around taking action. And that's really what we've seen is our parents are like a fire is lit under them. We have parents that started in our Parent Educator Academy. That is a 10-week virtual training program where they are learning all of the ins and outs of the education system, how it's structured, what proficiency means, how, where their children is reading, doing reading and doing math, and then what they can do, what practical applications, what practical skills they can work on at home to support their students' learning. And so from that academy, parents are, going off and demonstrating additional leadership by educating other parents and sharing information with other parents in their communities and their schools. And so it's really become, not just an academy where we are sharing information, but it is a movement. It's of sorts where parents are really driving and leading the solutions. But it is because we have gotten down to just clear explanations about what the data actually means and what it means for their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive deeper into that academy because I think it's really awesome what you have built and what you were talking about as far as, finding out, creating that urgency and finding out their child is, below level, but also having some comfort, because that can be so daunting on, and having that community, because it's not just their child. There's so many, whatever the stats are, 40% or 50% of students are below level. Like it's probably higher in a lot of areas. So just having that community, so like, well, you're not alone, but yes, this is important to address, but it's, a lot of other students are also in that same position.
Absolutely, yeah, and I do think that that's a really important piece that you just named is the fact that we're in this together, right? That
Mhm.
this is a shared responsibility and parents not going through this or experiencing these challenges in isolation, but having them be a part of a community and then having that community include the teacher and include their educators, right? That we're in this to support your kids, and that really is another critical component of getting parents to understand that they have a role to play. We have a role to play, and in the collective interest of just having a shared responsibility, and how the relationship between the school and the family, the teacher and the parent is super super
Mhm.
critical to supporting student outcomes. I think that that's where what our goal should be, right? That this is the relationship is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful as far as what you have specifically built. And yes, it's a community of parents and caregivers, but that connected piece to the teachers and to the district and the school, so they make sure, what they're doing actually aligns with what the school and what the classroom is trying to do. Um, and on that sense, if you had a magic wand and could get every student portal and dashboard to show three consistent things to caregivers, things that would actually help them understand where their kids stand, what would those three things be?
Yeah, so I would say number 1, where is their kid at, proficiency-wise? So the current proficiency level of their student, reading level, math level, etcetera, and then an explanation of what that actually means, again, in plain language, um, the skills that they need, whether or not they have met mastery, so just that very clear a status update, if you will. Here's the
Yeah.
status update. And then number 2, I would say like a high level, here's what the actions that as a parent you can do, the actions to take at home that address any specific skills gaps. So if there is a vocabulary list, like what is the best practice on, for reading, off the top of my head, reading 20 minutes at home, like those are things that parents can do and it feels accessible, and those high leverage day-to-day actions that they can take, that would support those specific skills gaps that are identified in the student status update. And then the third piece I would say is any short-term growth indicators to really drive motivation, right? So like if there's like a tracker where parents can see like these are these are the things that we have been the interventions that we've been adopting at school and at home, and almost like a progress to goal tracker, and setting benchmarks for that. I think that those, when we keep an actual scoreboard, it helps with driving motivation. And so making it, I think both for the student and the parent, something that they can look at and be motivated by and stay motivated by. The more that we can drive that piece of visualizing almost like a scoreboard, gamifying it, if you will, would be really, really neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know a lot of, ed tech companies are trying to incorporate some of those different things, but it's not necessarily on the parent level, which would be really cool so that they could see where their students are. And it just made me think of a question. I mean, that's a lot of great ideas as far as communication piece. Do you ever get the feedback of like, there's over communicating with parents, or like they're, worried about they're going to bombard the teacher or take too much of the teacher's times? Like, what do you say to folks like that?
Yeah, when we first started, it was a big moment, especially in the Spanish speaking community. That when I mentioned the communication divide, it was the Spanish speaking community that had the most experience with not receiving effective communication or regular
Mm.
communication from their schools. So schools closed in mid March, and I was the first person on the phone with families in mid May talking to them about their child's education. And so they were, you can imagine what the other end of the phone sounded like, very frustrated. And that's really where the communication divide um, kind of grew out of these conversations that we were having with families. But I think that when it came to what we heard from parents, often it was like, well, I don't wanna ask too many questions. I don't really get involved because the teacher is knows what's best. The teacher is the expert here.
Yeah.
I'm not the expert. And it was really out of a sheer, deep, profound respect for education professionals that families were feeling like they couldn't reach out and communicate. So, I don't know that it was a concern about over communication. It was really like, well, I don't know what I can contribute, right? I don't know what I have to add to the conversation. I'm just a parent. And so we actually flip that on its head with our families. What we tell them is like, look, you are the expert in your family. There is nobody in this world that knows your child better than you. You can actually help the teacher help your child because you know the little quirks of your kid, and what inspires them or what gets them excited every day. Like, you can share those insights with the teacher, and that will be really helpful in the classroom. And that was really something that we saw in distance learning. There was a mom, it was spring of 21, our first cohort of the Parent Educator Academy, and a mom had a little guy at the time in kindergarten who in was really just shy by nature. And so in the digital classroom, the way that that would show up is they were on Zoom, he would get called on, he would panic, freeze, shut down, turn off computer, disengage, and they were done for the day. And so she had gone an entire semester of this. And then she found us and she came to the Parent Academy. And at the end of the academy, we had an activity that we have our parents do. We have them create a student profile where they identify all of those little characteristics, the little quirks of their kid, what they know about their kid, because they truly are the experts in their families. And honoring that expertise, we encourage our parents to go have a conversation with the teacher about what they know about their children and their children's needs. And so she went and had a conversation immediately with the teacher. And the next day in the classroom, they took on a different approach. So mom and teacher are now working
Mhm.
in collaboration in the digital environment. They took a different approach, and she said he lit up. He was excited. He was so excited, and everything changed for him. And she's fighting through tears, telling us,
Mm.
how she realized just how much power she has to support his learning journey. And it was just something that she didn't realize before. And I think that that's when we honor the inherent wisdom and the lived experience of families, they can be powerful, powerful partners in the student's learning journey.
Such an amazing example. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, you talked today about how to motivate and engage students, and you really need to tap into what their likes are and what they're interested in and what their personality is like. And yeah, who better to have that and provide that for a teacher than their parent or caregiver. Um, Staying on the lines of communication. So we know email blast and robocall approach hasn't worked a lot for families. And, you've touched on this a bit on what that two-way communication can look like. But can you explain a little bit more how districts can build out actual systems where families can reach the school and feel heard? Like, what are some of those key examples of specific communication tools?
Yeah. What we have seen, this is the one of the things that we saw with the communication divide that I mentioned is what we were hearing, because we were speaking to both parents and educators simultaneously. And parents were saying, like, I'm not getting phone calls and I'm not, there's no communication from the school. And then school leaders were like, well, but we sent the email, we sent the robocall. And again, it's like there was effort on both sides, but there was just a huge miss in the communication approach. I would say, replacing those email and robocalls, email blasts or robocalls with really almost what we have seen most effective in working with our families is a WhatsApp style messaging channel. So they are on these applications. Most of the parents do have access to smartphone technology, and so how can you adapt and create, secure message portals that can share information? I'm sure that there are several of EdTech companies that have provided these tools and supports for schools, but that kind of frequent, easy to use two-way communication is super important in multilingual communities. I would say making sure that there is real-time translation, that a parent can drop a voice note, and that voice note, if they leave the voice note in Spanish, that it can be auto-translated for a teacher that might be a monolingual English speaker. So that real-time translation is critical, but allowing just thinking about accessibility when it comes to the communication there, I would say is making it as low friction, mobile friendly, and then of course, like I said, the translation is super critical, because that in multilingual households or monolingual Spanish speaking households, parents still need access to the information. We need to have the tools to support them, and I think that's really where the latest technology can be a real game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hugely important being able to meet parents where they are and what communication methods really work best for them. And yeah, and speaking of technology, maybe we shift a little to talk about AI and potential inequities this might bring up, or even potential ways this can really support. You're talking about translation and different things that AI could be so powerful in that communication piece. Um, it's AI is starting to be embedded a lot more in education, although certainly there's hesitancies for good reasons. But what do you think families should understand about AI this year? And what are some of your thoughts on that knowledge, to getting that knowledge to them without widening inequity or low connectivity households?
Yeah. I think, first and foremost, I think families in general, parents and caregivers really need an introduction to AI literacy, digital literacy. They're not going to necessarily need the technical expertise, but what AI is and what it isn't. I often realize or find even myself, just in reflection, I'm like, oh, we've been using AI for many years now. I don't think that we called it AI before. And so as the new language is being introduced, like explaining, providing that as a key constituency, providing that in plain language for families is super critical. I would also say that, the safety, protecting their families' data, protecting their student data, safe and appropriate use for learning, and making sure that families know how to leverage it. Because I think with everything, I was having a conversation this morning, and I'm like, nothing is really good or bad. It is how we use it. And so I certainly would put myself on. I'm an AI optimist, because I do believe that this, new technology. Anytime we have new technology, it can be leveraged to maximize our impact and our reach. How we use it and how we adopt it, I think, is going to be super critical, right? And so making sure that families know what are the appropriate uses for learning, how to ensure that their students don't become overly reliant on AI, but that they are helping they, along with their children, are helping to, to learn how to leverage the tool to maximize their learning. So how parents can leverage it to support their students' learning journeys. We actually ended up leveraging it in one of our parent leadership programs. Our work, it's called Juntos Leemos, Juntos Crecemos. So together we learn, together we grow. It's a parent led initiative that is supporting third grade parents and caregivers on understanding proficiency, reading proficiency data, where their kids are, and then how parents can support growth and student growth in literacy. And so in that, we have an introduction to ChatGPT as one
Mm.
of the modules in that program. And so giving parents really that um, foundationals. Here's what it is. Here's what it isn't. Here's how to safely use it. And then here's how you can use it to actually maximize and build your own confidence in supporting your kids' learning journeys. I think what I'm excited about is especially for the families who want to know how to help their kids but don't know where to start.
Yeah.
This I think is where AI can be really, really helpful if we provide parents with the foundations of how to best use it, right?
Yeah, and then they're learning by doing, and it's a specific example that they can go through of where they can support their kids. And at this stage, we're all novices, right? I mean, it's changing so fast and there's so much to learn. And even teachers the same way, they're trying to kind of support their students and helping them use it in creative and interesting ways. And it's same for parents of like, okay, how can I support? How can I learn? And how can I help my child move leverage it in the most effective way, like you were saying?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that just as I've been in a lot of conversations around AI and education, and I think for me, one of the biggest reflections is that, parents aren't usually in those conversations. They're not usually sitting in the stakeholder room. We're in a room full of educators, school and system leaders, and business leaders, community leaders, policy leaders, et cetera. And a very, very key constituency are the families. And I think this is where we can't forget that in this technology adoption, or as the sector adapts and evolves. This is a super critical constituency that needs to be at the table and actively informed alongside all of us. As you said, we're all novices, we're all learning, and they certainly need to be a part of that experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to that regard, are there any particular things that you would, encourage ed tech companies to look at to have in place for parents or as they're designing these different tools? Any thoughts or on guardrails or specific things you'd look for in designs?
Yeah, I would say like some non-negotiables. Certainly, we are a multilingual society, and so making sure that language accessibility is paramount.
Mhm.
It needs to be work as seamlessly in an English speaking household as it does in a Spanish speaking household or any other multilingual household. um just language accessibility for me is super, super critical. um Also making sure that tech companies are being mindful and thoughtful about sensitive family data without informed consent. um not extracting data, and actually explaining to families how their students' data is being used, how their data is being used. I think that um, without that, uh, when the data is extracted without real consent from families, that's where we erode trust, and it could cause harm. And so being mindful of that. And then again, making sure that we are explaining things in plain language for families to understand, um, that we're not overly complicating our explanations of things, but that it's super, super plain language, so that any family, whether they are college educated, not college educated, come from no education backgrounds, that they can all understand what the technology is doing and how what supports it can provide. I would also say making sure that the tools can work with being offline or with low bandwidth functionality. So, when Wi-Fi is not accessible in a lot of communities, whether you're in urban or rural um, areas, how can the apps continue to support student learning with those offline functions or low bandwidth functions? Um, and then, providing some clear boundaries so that this is, AI is here to support learning. It is not going to replace a teacher. It's also not going to replace um, certainly parental oversight or judgment around what's best for their kids, but that they're here to enrich the student experience. They're here to support the learning journey. And especially for some of my favorites are the tech companies that are working on supporting students with dyslexia, for example. I know there's a lot of work being done there. Students with learning differences, how the tools are adaptive to supporting the student's learning journey, but that there's still a need for the educators and that expertise as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that will never go away. And like you said, hugely important just to remember it's there to enrich and create, these unique experiences for students that have those individualized needs. But, the parents are there for that support, that critical thinking outside the box and just helping that thought process along. And like you said previously, they know their child best and how they can support them and really connect the learning and connect the dots with things. But really important things that you mentioned throughout there. And again, we're all thinking about the sensitivity to data, making sure, and we, me particularly, I work for a very technical company, always asking for things in plain language, and certainly, especially if English is not your first language, really making sure that that's all accessible. So thank you for bringing up those points. I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the Parent Educator Academy, which you touched on a bit. And I know it's a huge differentiator for your organization and really amazing what you've built out there. And I just want to talk a little bit about what makes your approach different and any evidence that you have within a parent and tool engagement that you've seen really change behavior and support proficiency for students.
Yeah. So, I mentioned, so our flagship program, the Parent Educator Academy, was really born out of necessity. It was born out of the wanting to address and support bridging this communication divide between schools and families. And so a lot of the approach to the work is making sure that the what we provide is culturally relevant and accessible for families. We do offer the program in English and in Spanish, trying to make it as accessible as possible. And we also really focus on the importance of relationships. I think it can't be overstated that when we are working with families, it's super relational work. I think it takes time for families or organizations to build trust in families. It takes time to do that, and so our team is very, very intentional about being present, being accessible, and certainly being a support to families. And so I think that those are some of the key differentiators of the Parent Educator Academy. It's also delivered online. So I mentioned we started in the pandemic, so we had to be online, but we actually have maintained the 10-week curriculum is delivered virtually. When we were asking families about whether or not we should switch to an in-person model, they quickly responded with, it made it more accessible to be online. I could log in from anywhere. I didn't have to worry about childcare or transportation. And so just reducing those barriers to entry or barriers to participation were super critical. So keeping that and providing opportunities for some in-person touch points. So our team has incorporated some in-person touch points with families. But again, the accessibility of being online is what parents preferred. And then I think for us, a lot of our work, the Parent Academy and the additional parent leadership work that we do, we really view this work as being, we and I am not here to save anyone. We are not saviors of our community. We are here to build with and not for families. And so we design all of our work is really designed with parents and caregivers at the center. They inform everything that we do. We ask for consistent and constant feedback. Our team gathers weekly exit tickets. They gather survey data from families. We run focus groups. So there's a constant feedback loop that for us has been super critical in adapting our curriculum, making improvements to how we deliver content, and also to addressing current needs, right? Because we're in 2025 now. We're no longer in 2020, and so environments have changed. Obviously, families' needs have changed, and so that level of communication and relationship allows our team to really stay connected to the community and to uplift any additional new barriers that they might be facing. And then on the advocacy side, that then helps us to advocate for the new needs that they might have. And then the final biggest piece of the academy, like the content is the content, right? Like it's navigating the education system. It's understanding what grade level your students are performing at, those very practical and foundational skills and tools that we provide. But at the core, it is about improving their confidence because, as I mentioned, parents are showing up to showing up to the academy not incredibly confident about whether or not they have a role to play. And so building their confidence and supporting them in knowing that they have agency. They have everything that it takes to navigate the education system. We're just here to really unlock that
Mhm.
confidence that they need. And so that's a central piece to our academy as well.
I love that, and I like what you said as building with and not for. I think that's probably huge to the mentality and the way that you design the program. And one question I had was about, like, you mentioned co-designing things with parents, how super important that is, but it also can be tricky and how you navigate things like compensation, language barriers, timelines, which you've mentioned some of those things. But are there any other things that you'd want to bring up that has worked really well for you?
Yeah, I think, when we started, we were able to offer, we this was a pilot, so we had incentives for providing input and feedback to parents. And so as we've scaled, I think for us it is about like how else can we acknowledge and recognize their participation and really honor their commitment to participating in the academy. So making the uh providing a recognition or a reward for participation. I think for what's been really cool is for some of the parents, this is their first certificate of completion of anything, right? Their first real award or recognition. And so honoring that, I think is super central to how we recognize that they made an investment of their time. They made a commitment to do this work. And then as parents skill up, so from the Parent Academy, we actually have seen additional leadership opportunities. So the Parent Academy is really kind of like a catalyst. We have parents that have gone on to become a parent leader. So that is a stipended role where
Mm.
parents are leading in their communities. They're building coalition with other families, educating them on, the status of proficiency in their neighborhood schools, and then the role of parents in improving those proficiency rates. So those parent leaders are compensated for their time. In South Phoenix, in particular, we had 3 parent leaders that built a network of over 60 parent champion ambassadors and a volunteer network of over 600 parents, in one community alone. And so that's the power of, when I say it's not just a leadership program. This is really a movement of families, making a choice to lead in their communities. And so that's what the Parent Academy is igniting. And then on the other side, we also have a pathway, where parents have, unprompted from us after their experience in the academy, they went on to pursue careers in education. So we had parents that became, everything from a parapro to a librarian to a crossing guard. Like, they were taking on these entry level positions and roles in schools, with little to no support from us, just sheer inspiration from the academy. And so that really was the inspiration behind our latest innovation, which is a 2-week summer institute for parents to become education professionals, with a literacy focus. So we had 8 parents participate in the pilot this summer. Out of that, um, we had 100% job offers. So all 8 parents were offered full-time employment in schools in South Phoenix with, either a classroom aide role or a paraprofessional role. And now 7 out of the 8 are working full-time in schools this academic year. And so that is the how Parent Academy is really igniting the leadership and the motivation and inspiration of families to take on leadership roles, but whether it's as parent leaders in their communities or as parent educators in their schools.
That's so amazing and really speaks to, what you've built in the community for building that confidence and igniting, like you said before, igniting what's within them and giving them that confidence to move forward, and for those parent leaders really paying it forward, right, to other parents and that were in their shoes and continually building it out. So I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, Stephanie, we've made it to the lightning round. I'm going to ask you just a set of questions and just answer whatever first comes to mind. Does that sound good?
All right.
Great. Okay. One thing schools should stop doing when it comes to family engagement.
One way communication or information blast, whether it's an email or a robocall that has no follow-up or no translation.
One simple, low tech thing that consistently builds trust.
I think it's that open communication and really authentic relationship building between educators and, parents and caregivers.
Perfect. And one AI use at home you'd greenlight this year.
I would say how AI can generate like a personalized reading or learning literacy routine for parents at home. Like what almost like creating like a toolkit for an individualized plan for their kid and what parents can do to support at home.
Love it. One dashboard change that would help parents act tonight.
I would say just a very clear and specific, here's what you can do this week. And like here's the actions that you could take this week. And then I think like having it designed like a little scoreboard that they can track their progress to goal on their weekly dashboard.
Very cool. Okay, so last question, and you spoke a lot to this already, but if you could get every educator, edtech company, and policymaker to change one thing this term that truly centers family and student success, what would it be?
Oh man, I would say I think the biggest thing, for I would say for district and or school and system leaders, making proficiency legible, like understandable, making it actionable, making it clear using plain language, that would be my call for school and system leaders. For tech companies, I would say really thinking about the importance of co-designing tools with multilingual families from day one. That it's not the afterthought, but that's where we begin, because if it's accessible for them, it will be accessible for everyone.
Absolutely, yes. A lot of ed tech companies know it's important, but actually building it into their process and building in that support from actual families and communities would be really impactful. Well, that's a wrap for today's session and episode of Tech and EdTech. A huge thank you to Stephanie Parra for sharing such a practical insights on family engagement, AI literacy, and parent leadership. We'll drop links in the show notes, including resources from All in Education. If today's episode resonates with you, please follow or subscribe, leave a rating, and share this with a colleague who cares about families at the center of student success. I'm Zahra, and this is Tech and EdTech. See you next.